The stars outside the massive window looked like scattered diamonds on black cloth. Taiho had seen this view 100 times since arriving at the Galactic Academy, but it still made him feel small. He was far from home, far from Earth, and surrounded by creatures. That made him feel like an ant among giants. The lecture hall was filling up with students from across the galaxy. Taiho sat near the back row where he always sat. It was safer there. Less attention. Beside him, his friend Yuna was reading something on her datapad. Her dark hair falling across her face. "You're staring at the stars again," she said without looking up. "They're pretty," Taiho replied simply. "They're just burning gas." "Burning gas can be pretty," Yuna smiled but didn't argue. They had been friends since childhood, growing up in the same small town in Korea. When Earth announced its exchange program with the Galactic Academy, they had applied together. Out of 10,000 applicants, only 5 humans were chosen. Taiho still didn't understand why he was one of them. The lecture hall was shaped like a half circle, with rows of seats rising toward the back. The seats were designed to fit many different body types, which meant they fit no one perfectly. Taiho's feet dangled slightly above the floor. The Morith student 3 rows down needed 2 seats just to hold his massive crystalline body. Students continued to arrive. The insectoid Keth clicked and buzzed as they communicated with each other. A group of Solari, their blue amphibious skin glistening under the lights, settled into seats near the front. They preferred to be close to the humidity vents. Taiho watched them all with quiet fascination. Even after 6 months at the academy, he still felt like a visitor in someone else's home. The other species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Humans had only left Earth a century ago. In galactic terms, humanity was still a baby learning to walk. "Did you hear about today's guest speaker?" a voice asked from behind. Taiho turned to see Minho, another human exchange student, taking a seat in the row behind them. Minho was quiet and thoughtful, the kind of person who watched more than he spoke. "I heard something," Yuna said. "A Dralian warrior, right?" Minho nodded, his expression serious. "My roommate is a Keth. He told me, Dralians are bad news. Really bad news." "What do you mean?" Taiho asked. "He said they're predators, not like Earth predators. They built their entire civilization on hunting and conquest. They believe that strength is the only thing that matters. The strong rule, the weak serve." Yuna frowned. "And they invited someone like that to teach a class?" "Diplomatic relations," Minho said with a shrug. "The Academy is trying to maintain peace with everyone, even species that don't really believe in peace." Before they could discuss further, the main doors at the front of the hall opened. Instructor Velis entered, moving with the graceful, flowing motion that all Etherans possessed. The professor had translucent skin that shifted colors with mood, and 4 slender arms that gestured expressively as they spoke. "Good morning, students," Velis said, their voice soft and musical. "Today we have a special guest who will discuss predator-prey dynamics across galactic ecosystems. Please welcome Korvax of the Dralian Empire." The doors opened again, and Taiho felt the temperature in the room change. It wasn't actually colder, but something in the air shifted. A presence entered the lecture hall that made every student instinctively tense. Korvax was enormous. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his body covered in thick gray scales that looked like armor. He had 4 muscular arms, each one thick with corded muscle. His head was reptilian, with a long snout filled with teeth that looked designed for tearing flesh. His eyes were yellow with vertical pupils, and they swept across the room like searchlights. No one spoke. No one moved. Korvax walked to the front of the lecture hall with heavy, deliberate steps. Each footfall echoed through the silence. When he reached the center of the room, he stopped and stood there, letting everyone look at him. "I am Korvax," he said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "I am a hunter. I have killed creatures on 100 worlds. I have faced beasts that would make your nightmares seem pleasant." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Today I will teach you about the natural order of the universe. The strong survive, the weak become food. This is not cruelty. This is truth." Instructor Velis shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Korvax had been invited by the Academy Council itself. He had diplomatic immunity. There was nothing the professor could do. Taeho felt Yuna tense beside him. He reached over and gently touched her arm, a small gesture of comfort. She relaxed slightly but kept her eyes on the Dralian. "Look around this room," Korvax continued. "I see many species. Some of you come from warrior cultures. Some of you come from peaceful worlds. But all of you, every single one, exists because your ancestors survived. They were strong enough to live." He began walking slowly along the front row, looking at each student as he passed. "The question is, are you still strong? Or has civilization made you soft?" Taeho watched the Dralian move, studying him the way he might study a wild animal. There was something dangerous about Korvax that went beyond his size and his claws. It was the way he moved, the way he looked at everyone around him. He didn't see students. He saw prey, and Taeho knew, with a cold certainty settling in his stomach, that today's lesson was going to be about more than predator-prey dynamics. Today, Korvax wanted to demonstrate something. He wanted to show everyone in this room exactly where they stood in the natural order, and humans, Taeho suspected, were going to be at the bottom of that list. He glanced at Yuna, then at Minho behind them. Both of his fellow humans looked tense, uncertain. They were thinking the same thing he was. They were very far from home. And they were very, very small. Korvax continued his slow walk through the lecture hall, and with each step, the silence grew heavier. Students who had been whispering to each other moments ago now sat frozen in their seats. The Dralian's presence filled the room like smoke, making it hard to breathe. "Let us begin with a simple exercise," Korvax said. "I will examine each species in this room and explain your place in the natural order. This is not meant to insult you. It is meant to educate you." He stopped in front of a group of Keth students. The insectoids were about the size of large dogs, with hard shells and multiple limbs. They were known across the galaxy for their intelligence and their skill with technology. "The Keth," Korvax said, reaching down and tapping one of them on the shell. The Keth flinched, but didn't move. Clever creatures, fast, good at building things, but fragile. One strong blow, and that shell cracks like an egg. In my culture, we call species like you runners. You survive not by fighting, but by hiding and fleeing. He moved on without waiting for a response. The next group were Solari, the amphibious species with smooth blue skin. They watched Korvax with wide, nervous eyes. "Solari," Korvax said. "Swimmers. Your ancestors lived in oceans and never learned to fight on land. Outside of water, you are slow and clumsy. A child of my species could hunt a dozen of you before breakfast."
One of the Solari
made a small sound of protest, but a sharp look from Korvax silenced them immediately. Instructor Velis stepped forward. "Korvax, perhaps we should focus on the academic aspects of silence," Korvax said without even looking at the professor. "You invited me here to teach, so let me teach." Velis's translucent skin flushed with a mix of colors: embarrassment, fear, frustration, but the professor stepped back. There was nothing to be done. The Academy Council had granted Korvax full authority over this session. The Dralian continued his walk. He reached a Moreth student named Brixel, a massive being made of living crystal. Brixel was one of the largest students in the Academy, towering over most other species. Surely, Taeho thought, the Dralian couldn't intimidate someone that big. But Korvax just laughed. "Moreth," he said, "big and hard and strong, but slow. So very slow. Your kind relies on your size to scare away predators, but size means nothing against a smart hunter. I have killed Moreth before. I waited until one was sleeping, then I found the cracks in its crystal body and drove my blade through them. It took less than a minute." Brixel's crystal form flickered with inner light, a sign of distress, but the Moreth said nothing. Even the largest student in the room was afraid. Taeho felt his hands curl into fists. This wasn't teaching. This was humiliation. Korvax wasn't here to educate anyone. He was here to prove his dominance. show everyone that Dralians were superior, and no one was stopping him. The Dralian worked his way through the room, commenting on species after species. The Etherians were too delicate. The Vorics were too trusting. The Fenari relied too much on their technology. Each observation was delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who genuinely believed they were speaking simple truth. Then Corbax reached the back of the room. He stopped at the row where Yuna and Minho sat. His yellow eyes studied them with open curiosity. "Ah," he said, "the humans." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. "I have heard about your species," Corvax continued. "You are new to the galaxy. Your homeworld is a small rock orbiting an unremarkable star. You have no natural weapons. No claws, no fangs. No armor, your bodies are soft and weak." He leaned closer to their row, and Taiho could smell him a sharp reptilian scent that reminded him of something niant and dangerous. "In all my years of hunting," Corbax said, "I have never encountered a species less impressive than humans. You are prey in its purest form. The only reason you have survived this long is because the galaxy did not notice you." He reached out with one massive hand and grabbed Yuna's arm. Yuna gasped as Corvax lifted her partially from her seat. His grip was casual, almost careless, but Taiho could see the pain on her face. The Dralayan's strength was immense. "Look at this," Corbax announced to the room, holding Yuna up like a trophy. "This is what prey looks like. Soft, weak, unable to defend itself. On my world, creatures like this exist only to feed the strong." Yuna struggled, but it was useless. She might as well have been trying to escape from a steel trap. "Let me go," she said, her voice tight with pain and anger. Corvax laughed. "See, it even tries to speak. How amusing. Does the food have something to say before it is eaten?" No one in the room moved. The Keth looked away. The Solari stared at the floor. Even Brixel, the massive Morith, kept his eyes fixed on nothing. Everyone was too afraid to act. Instructor Velis made a small sound of distress. The professor's feet seemed frozen in place. Taiho watched Eunice's face twist with pain as Corbax's grip tightened. Something hot and sharp was building in his chest. It was a feeling he recognized from old stories. From lessons passed down through generations, it was the feeling his ancestors had when they faced tigers with nothing but wooden spears. It was the feeling of a species that had learned, long ago, that running was not always an option. Sometimes you had to stand. Sometimes you had to fight, even when you knew you couldn't win. Taiho took a breath. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. Every logical part of his brain was screaming at him to stay still, to stay quiet, to survive. But Yuna was his friend, and humans did not abandon their friends. Slowly, quietly, Taiho rose from his seat. The room was perfectly silent. Every eye turned toward the small human who had just stood up. Even Corbax paused, his grip on Yuna loosening slightly as he turned to look at this unexpected interruption. Taiho stood with his hands at his sides. His heart was beating so hard he could feel it in his throat. His legs wanted to shake, but he forced them to stay still. He looked directly at the Dralian's yellow eyes. "Let her go," Taiho said. His voice was quiet, but steady. It did not waver. It did not tremble. It was the voice of someone who had made a decision and would not change his mind. Corbax stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his reptilian face. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just found something entertaining. He released Yuna, who fell back into her seat, clutching her arm where bruises were already forming. But Corbax did not look at her anymore. His full attention was on Taiho. "What do we have here?" The Dralayan said, his voice filled with dark amusement. "A hero, a brave little human standing up for its friend." Taiho said nothing. He just stood there, waiting. Corbax walked toward him, each step slow and deliberate. The Dralian was savoring this moment. It was clear from his expression that he found the situation hilarious. "Do you know what I could do to you, little human?" Corbax asked. "I could snap every bone in your body with one hand." I could tear your soft flesh into pieces. I could end your existence before you could even scream. I know, Taiho said. The simple response made Korvax pause. He had expected fear. He had expected begging. He had not expected this quiet acceptance, you know? Korvax repeated. And yet you stand? Are you stupid, human? Or do you simply want to die? Taiho took a moment before answering. When he spoke, his voice was still calm. I know what you can do to me, he said. I know I cannot stop you. I know I cannot hurt you. You are bigger than me, stronger than me, faster than me. By every measure that you value, you are superior. Korvax nodded, pleased. At least you understand your place. But you don't understand mine, Taiho continued. The Dralian's eyes narrowed. What? You look at me and see prey, Taiho said. You see something small and weak. Something that should run and hide. But you don't know what I am. You don't know what my species is? Korvax leaned closer, his hot breath washing over Taiho's face. Then tell me, little human. What are you? Taiho met his gaze without flinching. We are the species that hunted mammoths with wooden sticks. We are the species that crossed frozen mountains with nothing but animal skins to keep us warm. We are the species that built cities in deserts and sailed across oceans in wooden boats. We are the species that left our homeworld and reached for the stars, even when we didn't know what we would find. He paused, letting his words sink in. You think we survived because the galaxy didn't notice us? You're wrong. We survived because no matter how many times the universe tried to kill us, we refused to die. Korvax was no longer smiling. Something in the human's words, in his tone, in his steady gaze, had shifted the dynamic in the room. The other students were watching now, really watching. Brave words, Korvax said. But words cannot stop claws. Oh, Taiho agreed. They can't. But that's the thing about humans. We don't stand up because we think we'll win. We stand up because we can't do anything else. He took a small step forward, closing the distance between them. It was a tiny movement, but its meaning was clear. He was not backing down. You can hurt me, Taiho said. You can kill me. But I will not watch you hurt my friend and do nothing. That is not who I am. That is not who we are. A murmur ran through the lecture hall. The other students had never seen anything like this. Every species in the galaxy had survival instincts. Every species knew when to fight and when to flee. But this human was doing neither. He wasn't fighting, he had no chance of winning. And he wasn't fleeing, he stood. Right in front of the predator's jaws, he was simply refusing to move. Korvax straightened to his full height, towering over the small human. His claws extended slightly, gleaming in the artificial light. His muscles tensed. He could kill this creature in less than a second, but he didn't move, because for the first time in his long life as a hunter, Korvax had encountered something he didn't understand. The human's body was clearly afraid. He could smell the stress chemicals, see the slight trembling of the hands, but the human's eyes were not afraid. They were calm. They were resolved. They were the eyes of someone who had already accepted death and decided that some things were more important than living behind Taiho. Another human stood up. Yuna rose from her seat, still clutching her bruised arm. She stepped forward and stood beside Taiho, shoulder to shoulder. Then, from the row behind, Minho stood as well. 3 humans, small, weak, soft, standing. Together in front of a creature that could destroy them all, without breaking a sweat, and not one of them was running. The room held its breath. Korvax looked at the 3 humans standing before him, and for the first time since entering the lecture hall, he did not know what to do. This was not how prey was supposed to behave. Prey ran, prey hid. Prey begged for mercy. Prey did not stand in a line and stare at the predator with steady eyes. 3 of you now, Korvax said slowly. Do you think numbers will save you? I could kill all of you at once. It would take less effort than breathing, Taiho said. That's not why we're standing. Then why? Korvax demanded. There was something in his voice that hadn't been there before, confusion, perhaps, or frustration. Why stand if you know you will die? It was Yuna who answered. Her voice was tight with pain, but it was also clear and strong, because that's what humans do, she said. We stand with each other. We protect each other. It's not about winning. It's about being there. Korvac shook his massive head. That is foolish. That is weakness. Maybe to you, Minho said quietly. It was the first time he had spoken, and his voice was soft but steady. But to us, it is the only strength that matters. The Dralian studied the three humans for a long moment. His yellow eyes moved from face to face, searching for something: fear, hesitation, weakness. He found none of these things. Instead, found something that made him deeply uncomfortable. Instructor Velis suddenly spoke up, their voice echoing through the silent hall. If I may observe something, the professor said carefully. The Academy's medical sensors are active in this room. They monitor the biological states of all students for safety purposes. Korvax turned to look at the Etherean. What of it? The readings from the human students are unusual, Velis continued. Their heart rates have increased dramatically. Their bodies are producing large amounts of a chemical called adrenaline. Their muscle fibers are tensed for explosive movement. Pain receptors are becoming dulled. The professor paused, their translucent skin shifting to a pale blue, a sign of fascination. In human biology, this is called the fight or flight response. It is a survival mechanism that prepares the body for extreme action. What is interesting is that in most species, this response leads to either combat or escape. Velis looked at the three standing humans, but all three of these students are showing indicators of the fight response. None of them are preparing to flee. Their bodies are ready for combat, even though they clearly understand they cannot win. The other students in the room began to murmur. This was new information for many of them. The idea that a species could prepare for a fight it knew it would lose was strange and somewhat frightening. Korvax turned back to the humans. His expression had changed. The amusement was gone. The contempt was gone. In their place was something that looked almost like respect. Your bodies prepare for battle, even when victory is impossible, he said slowly. Why? What is the purpose of such a response? Taiho thought about the question. It deserved an honest answer, because sometimes, he said, fighting isn't about winning. Sometimes it's about buying time, giving others a chance to escape, making the predator work for its meal. If we're going to die anyway, we might as well make it mean something. Korvax was silent for a long moment. Then he asked a question that surprised everyone. And do all humans do this? Stand together against impossible odds? Not all, Taiho admitted. We're not perfect. We have cowards. We have people who run. We have people who betray each other. But when it matters, when our friends are in danger, when our families are threatened, yes, most of us would stand, even for strangers. Taiho nodded slowly. Sometimes even for strangers. The Drayland turned and looked at the other students in the room. The Keth were watching with their compound eyes wide. The Solari had stopped trembling. Even Brixel, the massive Morith, had leaned forward in his seat, his crystal body glowing with interest. In my culture, Korvac said slowly, strength is measured by what you can kill, by what you can conquer, by what you can take. This is how Durelians have always defined power. He turned back to the three humans. But you, your species defines strength differently. You measure power by what you can protect, by who will stand beside you, by what you are willing to sacrifice. Yuna spoke up. Is that so strange? Korvax considered the question. It is unexpected. I have hunted alone for most of my life. When I face danger, I rely on my own strength. The idea of depending on others, of trusting others to stand with me is foreign to me. That sounds lonely, Minho said. The simple words seemed to strike Korvax harder than any weapon could have. For a moment, something flickered in those yellow eyes, something that might have been pain, or might have been recognition. Then the moment passed, and the Draleen straightened to his full height once more, but his claws had retracted, and his posture was no longer that of a predator, about to strike. The lecture hall was completely still. Every student held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The three humans still stood in their row, facing the massive Dralian warrior. Seconds passed that felt like hours. Then Corbax did something no one expected. He took a step back. "The demonstration is over," he said. His voice was different, now quieter, thoughtful. The mocking tone was gone. "I have learned what I came to learn." He turned and walked toward the front of the room. His heavy footsteps echoed through the silence, but they no longer felt threatening. They were just footsteps. When he reached the door, Corbax paused and looked back at the three humans who were still standing. "You are not what I expected," he said. "Your species is not what I expected." "I will. Think about what happened here today." Then he was gone. The doors closed behind him. The pressure that had filled the room disappeared like air escaping from a balloon. For a moment, no one moved. Then the lecture hall erupted. Students began talking all at once, their voices overlapping in a dozen different languages. The keth clicked and buzzed with excitement. The Solari were gesturing frantically to each other. Even Brixel, the normally silent Morith, was making deep, rumbling sounds that translated as amazement. Instructor Velis hurried forward, their four arms waving with concern. "Are you hurt?" the professor asked, rushing to check on the human students. "That was incredibly dangerous. You could have been killed. Why did you do that?" Taiho sat back down in his seat. Now that the danger had passed, his legs were shaking badly. The adrenaline was leaving his system, and he felt exhausted, like he had run a marathon. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I just could not do it." Yuna sat down beside him, still holding her bruised arm. Despite the pain, she was smiling. "That's the most Taiho answer ever," she said. "You never think before you do something stupid." It worked, didn't it? This time, Minho sat down behind them, shaking his head slowly. "I can't believe I did that. I was terrified." "I'm still terrified." "We all were," Taiho said. "That's not the point." Around them, students from other species were looking at the humans with new expressions. Before today, most of them had barely noticed the human exchange students. Humans were new to the galaxy, small and seemingly unimportant. They were easy to overlook, but something had changed. A Keth student approached their row hesitantly. Her exoskeleton was a deep green, and her compound eyes studied them with obvious curiosity. "That was remarkable," she said, her voice clicking slightly as she translated her thoughts into Galactic Common. "I have never seen anyone stand up to a Dralian before. I didn't know it was possible." "It's not smart," Taiho said. "We just didn't have a choice." "You had a choice," the Keth replied. "You could have stayed seated like everyone else." "Like I did." She lowered her head in what seemed like shame. "I should have helped your friend." "I didn't." Yuna shook her head. "Don't blame yourself." Corbax was terrifying. Anyone would have frozen. But you didn't freeze. None of you did. More students gathered around the humans, asking questions, expressing amazement, and looking at them with something that hadn't been there before: respect. As the crowd grew, Instructor Velis gently dispersed the students and officially ended the class early. The professor then approached the humans one more time. "What you did was foolish and dangerous," Velis said, "but it was also remarkable. I have taught at this academy for 40 years, and I have never seen anything like it." The professor paused, their translucent skin shifting through several colors as they considered their next words. "I think I understand humans a little better now. You are not strong in the ways most species value strength, but you have something else. Something that may be more important." "What's that?" Taiho asked. "You have each other," Velis said simply, "and you will stand for each other, no matter the cost. That is not weakness. That is something I do not have a word for in my language." As the students filed out of the lecture hall, whispers spread through the corridors of the academy. By evening, everyone on Station Meridian had heard some version of the story. A human had faced down a Dralian warrior. 3 humans had stood together against impossible odds, and the Dralian had backed down. The details varied from telling to telling. Some versions made Taiho sound like a giant warrior himself. Some versions claimed the humans had special powers, but the core of the story remained the same. Humans were not what they appeared to be. in the weeks that followed. The human exchange students noticed a change. Other species no longer looked past them. Conversations stopped when they entered rooms. Students who had never spoken to them before now sought them out for discussions. And in the quiet moments, when Taiho looked out at the stars from the observation deck, he sometimes thought about Korvax. He wondered if the Dralian had really changed his mind about humans, or if it had all been an act. But then he would look at Yuna beside him, and Minho nearby, and the other two human students, who had become closer friends since that day. And he would remember that the lesson wasn't really about Korvax, it was about what it meant to be human too. Stand when you wanted to run. To fight when you knew you would lose. To protect the people beside you, no matter what. That was the lesson, and it was one the galaxy would not soon forget.